Here's one thing that I want to mention really quick that I think people should always keep in mind. People remember service long after they forget your name or long after they forget, let's say, that business name, right? You go to that restaurant and when you arrive, the valet guy just opens the door. Hey, welcome here, and they give you this excellent service. Months after, you forget about the restaurant name, but you don't forget about the service. Oh man, what was that restaurant? The service was just so great. Their approach, their friendliness, and everything, right? It works the same way when you approach somebody personally. When you approach them with great service, meaning adding value to them, and just your approach is very friendly and just adding value, they're gonna remember that long after they probably even remember your name.
Welcome to The Defense Never Rests with Morgan Akins, your monthly dose of uncommon sense about all things legal and some that are not.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of The Defense Never Rests. I'm your host, Meghan Henry, and today I'm joined by repeat guests, Josh Diggs and Chris Gutierrez. And we're here to talk about personal branding and marketing. Both Chris and Josh have done amazing jobs launching their own businesses and really making their online presence and their online branding very known on all the avenues that they do it. So they're here to talk about like how they got started and the efforts they put in, and just some advice for people who might be just starting out or not even knowing how to even approach personal branding. So with that, let's bring them in. Good afternoon, Josh and Chris. Thanks so much for joining me again on the Defense Never Rests. I'm so happy to have you both back.
Awesome.
Glad to be here.
Yeah.
So we're changing gears a little bit for this discussion today. We're talking about personal branding and how to build your personal brand and presence, and specifically online too, because that's how a lot of us are doing it these days. But you guys were already on the podcast not so long ago, but just for some of my listeners who may have missed that podcast, I will let them know where to find it. But let's give them a little background of who you are and why you're here and why we're chatting again. So I'm going to start with you, Josh. If you could just give us a little rundown of who's Josh Diggs, what do you do, and why should we listen to you?
I think the question is, who doesn't know Josh Diggs?
Yes.
Okay, so Josh Diggs, let's see, Director of Claims at Modern Rain Insurance Brokers, Power Connector, let's see, Work Comp Ninja, probably a few other creative titles, but I think that kind of covers the majority of it.
But we can't just, you kind of bypass what you did though. So you you started Modern Rain with another partner, but you built it up from the ground up with your partner. So and that goes directly into what we're talking about today is branding and how you've built up that business. So, let us know, how did you get started with Modern Rain? And, I know you talked about it during the last podcast, you partnered up with your partner, and, I think he had some really innovative ideas and you worked together to start the business together.
Absolutely. No, I didn't know you wanted the full, the Forrest Gump story. I can dig in. So let's
Forrest
see.
Gump light.
Forrest Gump-ish. So 22 years ago, I started in the work comp industry, literally at the mailroom of State Fund in California, and had no idea that I was going to stay in insurance, and just kind of slowly worked my way up. And then I was working there through college, ultimately got my degree, and felt like I was going to give this career a shot. So ended up moving into a claims examiner role, and then kind of bounced around from State Fund to AIG, and then ultimately Sedgwick. Handling claims, work comp on the work comp desk. Eventually moved on to the broker side of things, and I kind of really came into my own, if you will. Got a taste of the entrepreneurial kind of bug, and teamed up with Zach Brown at the time, who's not my current business partner, but really just kind of helped unleash kind of the beast that was, he helped kind of see that was in me. And, there were some things that I was really good at, talking to clients, being genuine, being passionate, all these other things. And then, of course, having the technical knowledge of work comp claims, and was able to parlay that into being a director. We started a company that we ended up selling, and then ultimately ended up starting Modern Rain Insurance Brokers. And that we turned 1 year old last month. So we're rocking and rolling. We're up to roughly 24 employees, growing, and retail brokerage in Southern California. And again, that's probably the short version there. But along the way, maybe that's kind of tying it all in. along the way, we've done a really good job of branding ourselves kind of with this passion, this advocacy. The genuine kind of person that you see here, I think, has been on display often over the last 6, 7, 8, 9 years on LinkedIn. And for some reason, people gravitate to that message. The message resonates with a lot of people, whether it's the claim specific, whether it's the journey, whether it's the entrepreneurial kind of approach, whatever it is, people tend to be interested in it. I get a lot of messages and people wanting some mentorship, guidance, that kind of thing. So along the way, personal branding has really helped kind of the foundation of what we do, and it really helped propel the momentum, kind of just amplify the message of who we are.
It also kind of helps kind of define who you are. So you kind of like, you don't go off in so many different directions and try to be too many things. So you water down what you're good at.
Yeah, I think that's definitely part of it. And I think just often just posting about my thoughts, my ideas, my wins, my successes, maybe some losses, that growth opportunities kind of along the way. I think people just kind of get a sense that they know me, even though they may not have ever actually met me. And the branding has a lot to do with that. So they see me, I think they feel the passion, they feel the energy, they feel the aggression or whatever it is that I'm posting about at the time. And I think that's really kind of just helped with any new business opportunities and ultimately has translated into modern reign opportunities for recruiting purposes, a lot of other things, a lot of other ancillary benefits that have come out of this branding, if you will, this personal brand.
So along the way, you've become acquainted with Chris, who also is his own entrepreneurial in his own right. And Chris started Strike National Investigations. So Chris, why don't you talk a little bit about, how you came to launch Strike and kind of your steps in that process?
Yeah, sure thing. I'll give the 5-minute version because I can sit down for like 5 hours to talk about this. But so I also have a claims background and law enforcement background, so kind of a mixture of both, and that's what prompted me to get into the private investigations industry, more specifically geared towards insurance fraud and defense. So I started, I would say, my career when I was like 12 with the police cadet program at my local police department. And then since there, just kind of worked my way up until I turned 18 and got hired by the police department. So worked different divisions: dispatcher, records, detective bureau, patrol. And then after that, went into private investigations. I was landing in the ER too often, so law enforcement wasn't really the thing no more. And then I would always hear people talk about how SIU was top of the top. They were the elite guys of the industry. So I was like, okay, well, I got to be there too. So I went and I applied for Geico insurance, and it was like 120 people for one position, and I ended up making it. Not because of the years of experience. Everybody probably had like 20 years on me. But I guess they just really liked me a lot because I was really good at selling myself during the interview. And that goes hand in hand with personal branding. Quickly rose after 2-3 years to being ranked #1 in the entire country for the entire company, and then went to Liberty Mutual as well. There was the same thing too. I was the youngest investigator in the whole country. And then I started my own thing. So it wasn't Strike at the beginning. It was under a different company name. And then eventually the Strike brand came in once we obtained national coverage. But personal branding was really critical in the entire process, and it still is. I remember a couple of years ago, I was going through interviewing and body language detection training. And my instructor was also an instructor for the CIA. And he said, hey, look, I can tell that you're the youngest guy here in this room. Everybody is like gray hair and, beards and probably some guys with some canes, and you're not. So you're not really going to be able to sell to people the idea that you have decades of experience. And that's not really going to work, because they're going to look at you and they're going to be like, how does this guy who looks like he's probably like 15 have decades of experience? So you're going to have to sell them the idea of all the certifications and specialties that you have. that's what you need to brag about. And so that really stuck with me. And since then, that's what I made it a goal. Every time that I would talk to somebody, and whether it was a prospect, whether it was a business opportunity, whatever the situation was, I wouldn't brag about my years of experience. I would brag about my specialized training and what set me apart from everybody else. And that, in a major way has contributed to why Strike is what it is now and why it has gained so much popularity over the last couple of months. So it's very, very crucial, personal branding, when it comes to anything.
So one thing that comes up to mind, though, when you say that, did you ever have any trouble or hesitancy bragging about your skills? And some people, I asked this because some people are like, nope, no problem. And then like, I know I sometimes like, oh, like I like you hold back a little because you're like, oh, I don't want to seem too braggy, but like, how else is someone going to know if you let them know, especially if they're not, I mean, you could show them in your work, but they might not give you a chance to do the work if you don't tell them how effectively you can do it for them.
Yeah, totally. There was a time where there was a little bit of hesitation as to sharing a little bit too much about my training and specialties, because it might come across maybe as cocky, right, to some people. And there's that fine division where it's like, okay, what's that level that it sounds like you're being too cocky, or what's the level where you're just sharing your background? And so there's a very gray area there, and you kind of just get better over time of how not to sound too cocky, but at the same time being able to sell your experience. And so I've gotten better at it over time. But yeah, initially I would hesitate a lot to just share to people some of that experience, because I was a little concerned that it would come across as cocky, and that wasn't what I wanted to for them to perceive. First time, especially that you're meeting somebody.
Well, because it's a fine line, right? Like it's like it's like you don't want to be you don't want to overshare and put someone off. So you have to kind of strike a nice balance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll jump in there for a second too, because I get that often too, is that, hey, Josh, like I'm doing some good work, but I don't know like how to do it without sounding like I'm pumping my chest or just bragging. And so what I tell them is find a creative way to tell the story without saying, I've got these 18 certifications, right? Maybe you outline how this one specific certification that maybe took a year, 2 years to get, helped you to achieve a great outcome, right? And there's all these people, you can have all these acronyms at the end of your name and all, or before, whatever. But the reality is telling a story can accomplish so many things. And in the way that you tell the story could effectively show how great you are with clients, how you got the great outcome, how you arrived at the idea or the strategy. So to me, yes, you want to be able to tell these stories or these outcomes or these successes that you're having. You just need to find a creative outlet for how to do it without it sounding braggadocious, right? But there's nothing wrong, in my opinion, with expressing how you feel, how you got to win, how you earned a new account, how you save somebody a ton of money on a renewal, whatever it is, whatever you consider to be a good outcome, there's always a great story that you can tell that can show so many things, right? Claims advocacy, that can show your interaction with clients, your willingness to think outside the box, to get wins, to get successes. I think it's all in the delivery of how you do it. Because a post that says, I've got 18 certifications, I'm listing them all right here. That doesn't make any sense. But if you specifically stated how that one certification, that one training, that one instructor, that one, whatever it is, how that contributed to the win that you've got, you are basically selling yourself on so many different levels without sounding like you're selling. You're telling a story. Yeah. And in doing so, that brand, you're starting to build that brand where you're like, wow, this person in one eloquent post told me 5 different things when maybe they were just trying to tell me one. They just wanted to tell me how cool it is that they've got these certifications or whatever that thing is. But the delivery of it is so important. And that takes some finessing, that takes some crafting, but also that takes you doing it. That takes you doing it to realize, hey, that worked or that didn't. Or, hey, I got some negative feedback on that. Or this one got really good feedback. And so I think part of it is it's going to be trial and error, but most of it is just freaking activity. You just got to get out and you got to do it. And then you build on the response, and you can, field some, put some feelers out there. Hey, was this good? Was this not? Don't always judge it on likes or comments or, reposts and things like that. But did you feel good about that? And did that check all the boxes that you were trying to accomplish with that post or with that brochure or that email? And if so, then you're winning, and your branding is getting out there. And if you do it well, then you'll be able to tell people 5 different things.
Yeah.
One story.
And Josh brings up a good point of the importance of being able to incorporate that experience, maybe in just a typical discussion, maybe with a client, right? And I do that often rather than sitting there and saying, hey, look, we're the best because look, I have all these 15, certifications. That may sound cocky, and that may not come across as too well. But if you sit down there and you're doing, let's say, a claims review, and they're talking about how these medical providers are giving them headaches and how they believe that they're all working together. Well, the way I incorporate my past experience, I say, hey, look, it's interesting that you mentioned that. When I used to work for the Los Angeles Major Medical Fraud Task Force, this is what we were seeing. And it looks very similar to what you just pointed out, and blah, 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 blah. So I just incorporated the fact that I was part of this specialized team, this task force, without actually just bringing it up like that and just listing it there. And now they know, oh, shoot, he was part of the specialized team. He knows what he's talking about, but you're not really putting it there in that particular way. You're incorporating that so that you can attribute how that experience makes you an expert in whatever topic you're talking about. And that comes across better, in my opinion, and it sells much better too when it comes to personal branding.
So I want to back up though a little bit, because you both have established brands, but you didn't start there, right? You started somewhere from scratch. So I'm curious to hear about like what your brainstorming or thought process was going in when you built your brand, and was it that intentional, or did some of it happen accidental? Because I think for me, some of it's been accidental, how I've kind of fallen into, I guess, what you would call my personal brand. So I'm curious how it happened for each of you. I'll start with you, Josh.
Yeah, so I don't think I could have envisioned when I started on LinkedIn, 7, 8, 9 years ago, that this is what it would have led to. I think more than anything else, I knew a bunch of people in the industry because I've worked at, a handful of places, and there's so many different webs of people moving around and things like this. And I was always good at staying connected to people in general. So I initially just saw it as an opportunity to reach out to people that I hadn't talked to in a while, that were in a professional setting, right? And so it started with that, and then just checking in on people. Hey, how are things going at where you're at now? Are you happy over there? What are those accounts like? What's the day-to-day look like? Is it any different than when we worked together? What kind of exciting projects are you working on? And it just kind of started with that. And then as I started to meet new people, I'm like, hey, I used to work at where you're working. Is the same people over there, the same branch manager, same supervisor? Is that account still over there? Just those kinds of things. So it didn't start with this whole, idea of I'm gonna set out to build my own personal brand. I couldn't even imagine at that time that I would be in an entrepreneurial opportunity or own, a couple of different companies and things like that. That just wasn't even on the radar. So it just started as a networking opportunity. I always understood the value of networking. So it started with that. But as I started to gain some followers and gain a group of people in my network, then I wanted to share some of the things that was going on. It started with maybe just commenting on other people's posts and liking other people's posts, or maybe sharing articles that I thought were beneficial. And I've got a journalism background too, so that may have helped as well. But I've got this idea of the way I write. It's kind of a little bit tighter. It's not kind of a rambling or venting. It's more just kind of tight. And I feel like people can kind of get to it and see the point of why did he share this? Why did he post this? And what I would do is I would tell people why I thought this is important. Hey, this is a great article, but why? Here's a sentence or two explaining why. And then I would get feedback from people saying, hey, great share. I'm glad you shared this. I hadn't seen that. This was really cool. That kind of stuff. And I'm like, oh, some of these people that I've never met or some that I have met are thanking me for having, sharing certain things that they didn't have access to, or bring things to their attention. And then it just kind of just built from there, and said, hey, maybe I should start having my own thoughts and ideas. And then as I was growing in my own career, I started to say, hey, there's other people that are having similar challenges or issues. I'm going to make a post about this. I'm going to get people's thoughts. And then it just kind of just grew from there to the point where I was doing it regularly, and my voice started to become apparent and to be kind of, I guess, somewhat of what it is now. And then I would just get great feedback. I would go to conferences and say, hey, like, I really like that these things that you share, you think differently and it comes across, and you're passionate about stuff and it comes across. And so without knowing recognizing what I was doing and not doing it intentionally, I was starting to get really, really positive feedback. And then eventually this turned into, hey, Josh, you appear to be the expert at so-and-so. I've got a question for you that can help me or my company. Can you help me with this? And then that's when the light bulb kind of went off and said, wow, people are now starting to see me as an expert or as an industry vet or whatever you want to call it. And now people are reaching out to you to get their thoughts on things that could literally impact what I'm doing and what they're doing, ultimately led to business opportunities. And that's when I recognized, kind of fully harnessed what I was doing could directly lead to, in some cases indirectly, lead to some new business opportunities. And that's when I started making more of an intentional decision to post these kinds of things, maybe change the wording or that kind of stuff. But it didn't start that way, but it grew into it.
Yeah. Well, and the theme though that I pull out of that is that, you know, you started to gain real traction with genuine content and, you know, having thoughtful, genuine comments, and then doing stuff that wasn't forced. It just flowed from you. And then that kind of developed your brand for you. How
Absolutely.
about you, Chris?
Yeah, well, to build up on what Josh was mentioning, I think personal branding oftentimes, more often than not, starts unintentionally, and then eventually it becomes intentional. Once you get to the point where your personal branding is intentional, then that's what I consider the next level, because now it's very targeted. Everything that you do, every post, everybody that you talk to, the way that you mention things, or the way that you're posting, it's being intentional. And it's being done that way for a reason. And for me, it also started unintentionally. I wasn't really much of the social media guy before even, and I was just on common platforms, but wasn't really too active on LinkedIn. Once I, left the SIU industry with the carriers and then started my own firm, I knew I wanted to build a large firm. I wanted to be a national firm that everybody recognized, but I just didn't know what that looked like or how to even get there. And so I was doing a lot of non-intentional stuff, like just reaching out to people, and through that's how I met Josh, just reaching out. And now I still actually have that message, and I went back at it a couple of weeks ago and I actually called Josh when I did. And then I was like, oh gosh, this was such a horrible way of reaching out to, because it was very salesy and just the approach was just horrible. I mean, I would not reach out to somebody that way now. But it's good to look back at how I was reaching out to people. And then during this whole process of being able to just surround myself with mentors in the industry and people that have been doing this for some time and been able to perfect the craft of personal branding, like Josh and some other people in my power circle, then obviously I present myself differently now, but now because it's intentional. And so that's if I could give advice to people out in the industry or whoever's listening to this podcast, if they're asking themselves like, well, how can I start being intentional with personal branding, and how can I skip all those maybe months or years of being unintentional? Like, I just want to dive in, right? I just want to be intentional and I want to be on that next level. I think you can. And the way that you do that is look for those people in the industry that are very good at personal branding. They're very good at selling themselves, selling their company. They're just very creative. Get close to them and pick their brain. Just approach them and say, hey, look, I really admire what you do. It seems like you're really good at this. Would you mind just having like 5 minutes so that I can just pick your brain and just see how I can improve my processes, or what is it that I'm not doing that maybe I should be doing? And it starts that way, and then start building that relationship with those people. Eventually, their experience is going to translate to you, and you're going to avoid all those years of trying to figure it out because they've already figured it out. So use that to your advantage so you don't have to spend all those years figuring it out. And then you get to that level of being intentional. And once you become intentional, it's only a matter of what's your purpose, right? What's the reason why you want to be intentional with personal branding? Is it because you want to develop more business? Is it because you want to develop more popularity, both with your brand or your name? Is it both, or is it something else? But then you're able to identify that and be very intentional with your branding, and then it's just game on. It just you just start seeing all the fruits that it produces. But you have to start. And that's the best thing. Pick somebody's brain that's already been doing it.
And that's such good advice too. And like, not only pick their brain, but like listen to what they have to say and implement some of those things that they've done in your own efforts.
Right.
One thing I can't move on without mentioning this, when you mentioned like the messaging people or getting like bad messages, there is nothing I dislike more than getting messages over and over from people trying to sell me that then get more aggressive. And I just sit there and I'm like, if I didn't respond to your first message, do you really think that the third message in which it just happened the other day that someone said, oh, I guess you're not interested in making more money. And I wrote back, I actually did write back at that point, and I said, I don't think I'm your target. Like you, and it was clear that what they were trying to sell to me was something that wouldn't work in a defense business model, like a defense attorney business model. They were looking for a plaintiff's attorney. They're trying to, basically give me some, funnel to get, personal injury type clients. I was like, you spent zero time, like zero, even looking at anything on my profile, and now have sent me multiple like aggressive messages, like, and within like not even like weeks apart, like days.
I agree. I get a ton of those too, and because they see us in the insurance industry, for sometimes I get messages for services that would be more targeted to a broker rather than an investigations firm, right? I have no use for their services or would even consider it. But their approach is as if they're reaching out to a broker. Hey, I see you're in the insurance industry. This is what we do, X, Y, and Z. I would say, I have no statistics from the top of my mind, but I to some degree, I guess, probably cold emailing my work at some point. If you annoy somebody so much that they're like, okay, whatever, let's hear it. Okay, you got 5 minutes, let's hear it. But it more often than not annoys people. And I feel that that's probably an old way of selling or trying to gain business, but the industry has shifted. And now it's more relational and it's more personal branding and people knowing who you are. Sometimes people would just do business with you just because they like you as a person, right? And so that's things that I also learned through the process that I often tell people too. Hey, do your research very well on who your prospects are, and rather than just reaching out to them through a cold email or a call and trying to sell them something, don't sell them anything for at least a couple of weeks or a couple of months. Don't sell them anything. Contact them and try to add value. Find ways to add value to them. Value over and over and over and over again. Don't ask for anything in return. Just add value as much as you can. Worst thing that can happen is if they don't do business with you, oh, well, you never try to sell them anything. You added value. You're going to come across as a nice guy or a nice girl that just added value, and they're going to look up to you. Right. But a lot of times people are going to be like, hey, this person's just been adding a lot of value to me without asking for anything in return. And you know what? We just came across a claim that we need a defense attorney. We need a PI firm. Let's give them a shot because, they've been helping us out without asking for anything. Now let's help them out. And you're building that relationship. And then that next step is actually, kicking it out of the park and actually showing them that you have good work product and that's, above their expectations. And then you earn yourself a client, and then you just keep building on that relationship. And that's how you learn those earn those long-term relationships with clients. But it all starts with adding value and then building upon that relationship with more value. Not just trying to sell them something. Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I also feel like when you go like overkill on the sell or the attempt to sell, it comes off desperate versus, and then you can't help but like, well, the other individual's probably thinking like, well, do they really need the like work that bad that, you know, and it like when they smell the desperation, it's like weakness. And, you know,
Yeah.
you don't.
It makes people wonder like, hey, maybe they're not really doing a good job. And that's the reason why they're so desperate for work, right? That might be the perception. And that's another part of personal branding, the perception, right? What you believe and what you try to convey, it's different than what people are going to perceive of you or your brand. And so that's where being very intentional with how you present things, how you present yourself and your company, it matters, because that's the perception that they're gonna perceive. And that perception becomes a reality at some point. It becomes people's reality. When they think of it so much, eventually they believe it. And so that matters what they're perceiving. And so if you're right, you're coming across as very salesy, then people might just wonder like, hey, why are they being so pushy? Is it because nobody else is really working with them? And if that's the case, is it because maybe they just don't really have a good work product and that's why they don't work with them? And so that may even cause that person to even just block you because they just don't want to listen to you.
Yeah,
So
I do that. I've definitely blocked people on LinkedIn. When I get those repeated messages, I'm like, nope. I don't even just let it go to spam. I don't even want to see them.
yeah. Well, I mean, Josh, like mentioning back, right, where I said that when I initially reached out to Josh, and it was more like, hey, Josh, I see you're like everywhere in the work comp industry. You know, everybody knows you, blah, blah, blah. I would love my company to do work for you. And it was just very salesy, very like straightforward. And I remember Josh's response. It was, I can't remember the exact phrase, but it was something like, good post, stay in touch, something like that. And then I was like, dude, didn't you like read my message? I'm asking you for work. And he was just like, good post, right? Stay in touch. But you would, the majority of people would simply just end it there. This guy is not going to give me business. We're done, right? And at that point, I realized once he did that, hey, this isn't working. This approach isn't working. Maybe, okay, we'll stay in touch and we'll just see what happens. And just over the course of those months that followed, you know, talking to him and talking to more people and just learning like, hey, add value, find ways to do creative things and just keep adding value to this person. Don't ask for anything in return. And I just kept adjusting my process and just doing that. And then eventually it turned into, you know, big returns. But yeah, it started with, I was also one of those selling people, just cold calling. So whoever's listening to this, if I ever send you one of those messages, delete it, send me a text and I'll message it. I'll send it back and I'll give you something without, I'll give you something without asking for anything in return. That's what I do now.
But there's such a valuable lesson there though, because I was there too. Like where you just, you kind of have to fail a little bit, you know, to get better. You're not going to be perfect at it from the start. I think I don't know anyone who is. And if you are,
I think that's kind of how you tweak your approach, is that if you send that same message that's copy and pasted to 20 different people and nobody responds, then there's probably a reason. Maybe it's, you know, that maybe the message was too long. Maybe it was extremely salesy. Maybe you didn't clarify what your value prop is. Maybe you didn't, you know, show how you can actually help somebody. So like by sending something to a lot of people and not getting a response, then your response is, I'm not doing something right. I need to tweak it. And so maybe you shorten it up. Maybe you focus in on one thing. And my big thing is, I always tell people, look, my job is to make you look like a rock star. Point blank, period. That's my job, is a rock star maker. I need to make you, as the risk manager or the claims manager, whoever it is, I need to make you look like a rock star. I need to do my job to save you money, to close more claims, to reduce reserves, whatever the objective is, that's my job. And so then I'll find out a way to get there and I'll show you exactly how I do it. But that's what I do. And when you're able to kind of drill down, oh, okay, well, I need to hear more, because nobody's ever reached out to me making me want to be a rock star. What do? And we can kind of go from there. But if you send the same kind of templated salesy approach, and I've been in the industry 22 years, and I've done this, and I've been here, and I've been there, and I've done great for a lot of clients, just like you. That's the same thing that they're going to get 10, 20 other times that month. Nobody wants to hear that crap. the 1 out of 100 times when they literally are dealing with that exact scenario, they'll respond, but everybody else is not even going to open or maybe even respond. So that's oftentimes the failure in by way of no responses. That's how you figure out what's working. And if you drill down on this rock star approach or whatever it is that you're expert in, or whatever that one thing is that's short, and you get 50% responses, and hey, this is resonating. Let me build on that. And then you kind of figure out what works and what doesn't. And then you start to work harder at the things that are working. And then you kind of hone your approach. And then, as you get yeses or feedback, that's visual and physical confirmation sometimes that it is working. And that's where you need to kind of go with that approach.
Here's one thing that I want to mention really quick that I think people should always keep in mind, and it goes back to people remember service long after they forget your name, or long after they forget, let's say, that business name, right? You go to that restaurant, and when you arrive, the valet guy just opens the door. Hey, welcome here, and they give you this excellent service. Months after, you forget about the restaurant name, but you don't forget about the service. Oh man, what was that restaurant? The service was just so great. Their approach, their friendliness and everything, right? It works the same way when you approach somebody personally. When you approach them with great service, meaning adding value to them, and just your approach is very friendly and just adding value, they're gonna remember that long after. They probably even remember your name. And so I think that's a crucial part of personal branding. And whether it's you're trying to build upon your career, you're a newer entrepreneur and you're trying to grow your business, whatever the situation is focused on adding value always, and finding ways for people to look good, finding ways for them to rise to the top, and find ways to help them do that. They're going to remember you much longer than just sending a cold message and trying to sell them something. And people appreciate that. They appreciate that when you just try to help them with no expectation, nothing, expecting nothing in return from them, and then they find ways to try to do the same thing with you. But that's something that's built upon over time. It may happen within 3 weeks. It may happen after 2 years, and it's just something that you just have to do. You have to build it into your daily life. You have to do it unconsciously and just try to add value to people. Don't try to sell them nothing. And at the end of the day, they don't do business with you. Oh, well, you still made a connection, and they still know who you are, and you can just continue doing the same.
Yeah, that's one thing I see come up a lot too, is the expectation for immediate results, and then frustration when it doesn't happen. And it's something like I talk to people a lot about, because I'm like, well, if the expectation is for immediate results, you're always going to end up disappointed. And that's not why you should be doing this, looking for an immediate yes. And again, that also goes to the desperation factor, right? Because it shows, if you're disappointed that you don't get an immediate result, then that you could feel that energy, and then it just feels like you're doing everything for the wrong reasons. Like, you're not doing it to actually help anyone. You're doing it to help yourself. And then your whole message becomes just like disingenuous. So it's like, you kind of have to change your mindset. Like, you shouldn't expect overnight results. You probably shouldn't expect results for a year, or more. You just have to consistently add the value out there, and that's where you will see the fruits of your labor.
And I think it's okay to have the expectation that you may want, not always, but that you may want something out of that effort, right? Okay, this is a good business prospect for me. Eventually, I would like to earn their business. And it's okay for you to maybe have that goal, but your approach is different. Now it's like, okay, I want to add value to them as much as I can so that I can earn their business and they can trust me over time, rather than just expecting them, because I bought them lunch, just expecting them to send me files next week. And that happens a lot, I would say, with my generation and just a lot of people in the industry, that they want results like this and they don't want to put the work over time. You just have to. It's just one of the things that Like I mentioned earlier, you want to skip the initial trying to figure it out and be more intentional with personal branding. Find a power connector in the industry, approach them, pick their brain, and that's how you skip that. But when it comes to once you're intentional, when it comes to building that trust with people, you can't really, there's not really a magical way of just skipping that. It's just going to depend with that particular person, and you're just going to have to keep building upon that trust. Eventually, if it turns out into a business opportunity, great. And if it doesn't, oh well, you just keep doing it and just keep adding value, and that's how people are going to perceive you in the industry. And that's a good spot to be in my opinion.
So, something I wanted to bring up though is the having the ability to pivot, because and I think we all got struck with this, like, look, when COVID first happened, we all were forced to pivot, and it included and how you branded yourself, how you marketed, how you tried to generate business, and I think it's no different now. Whatever Josh is doing and Chris that you're doing now, you might have to pivot in the future to adjust to the changing marketplace and to potential client needs and this and that. So what is your advice as to how to figure out how to pivot your branding as necessary?
So what I would say on that is I would absolutely agree with the idea that those that were well connected or that had good relationships and good networking, good personal branding, those are the people that won during COVID. When the world was shut down and the year and a half, 2 year, just kind of fogginess, the folks that didn't have relationships, that were in a new business development role or marketing role, or where it was important for them to have contacts to get new opportunities, those people struggled. If your whole model was built around taking people out to lunch and that's how you close business, there was nowhere to go.
Yeah.
Right? Were you going to be a DoorDash guy? And that just wasn't going to happen, right? So the folks that had a personal brand built up, you didn't need that, hey, I'm going to go out to lunch to go meet somebody. They already knew who you were, whether you had met them or not. And so, I like to use the analogy that I start on second base because of the platform that I have and the familiarity that people have with me. I don't start at the plate with a 0-0 count. I'm already on second base. People already know they feel like they know me. They feel they know my approach. They know my passion, my background, those things, my thoughts on certain, and certain takes on different, industry, topics. And so they've already kind of made up their mind. I'd like to work with this guy, but maybe we just have to figure it out. So when you reach out, it's not, hey, this is Josh, this is what I do. It's like, yeah, I got that part. Let's figure out how we can make something happen, where the magic is. Let's figure out what the lane is and let's go for it. So the people that had that personal branding during COVID, those are the people that went on offense. It's the people that needed to reach out or relied on a conference or relied on emails and all the just physical contact. Those are the people that were struggling because now what do I have to do? So you absolutely have to pivot, and having a personal brand makes that so much easier because now your pivot goes from, being in person or being in conference or, to Zoom or whatever it's going to be. But if you have that base already, then it's just a matter of figuring out, okay, which way do I pivot? How do I do it? And then I go for it. And those people were way better positioned to succeed than someone that hadn't been established, that didn't have a LinkedIn presence, that didn't have a website, all those other things. Who are you? You're reaching out to me, who are you? I don't know you. And no, I don't want to meet because I don't know what you're about and I can't meet. So no. But the people that had that personal brand, I felt like were way better positioned to set a meeting, to get a new opportunity, to close business, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I agree. I mean, Josh mentioned something very important, which is personal branding is going to allow you to start on second base. And that by far, right, it already eliminated the whole process of this is who I am, this is what my business is, this is what we offer, this is it. It eliminates all that stuff. And usually on first base is where a lot of people get stuck and the process terminates there. They never make it to second base. And when you're very good at personal branding and you leverage that, you star on second base. And I have a very good example. Josh and I recently went to a conference in Vegas, National Work conference, and there was this law firm that just approached me. I've never met them before. I had heard their name around because they're a reputable law firm too here in California, and they just knew who I was. I had never met them before, but they just approached me and say, "Hey, you're Chris. You're that young entrepreneur of the century." That's how they described it, right? And I'm like, yeah, I guess. And it was flattering, obviously, when people just approach you and they say that. But at the end of the conference, it turned to, hey, you know what? We've been discussing over the last couple of days of the conference. We're just going to send all of our business to your firm, 100%. Just because we really align with your values, with your company, everybody talks good about Strike, and we just want to do business with you. At no point I approached them asking them for their business. No point. Themselves, they came to me and said, they said, we want to do business with you. Obviously, all of us know as entrepreneurs and everybody that has a business that is a much better approach and much better position to be in rather than you approaching them. Because now they're the ones wanting to do business with you. You're not asking for it. So that's the benefit of personal branding. And when things start changing, right? Because things will change. That's just naturally going to happen in the industry. LinkedIn's the big thing right now. Who knows? Maybe in like 5 years, we're going to have to be communicating through TikTok, right? And doing some dancing videos. And that's how we're going to do business proposals. But we're just going to have to pivot to that. And so that goes with being open-minded. As an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as just somebody trying to develop their career, be open-minded to change and see how you can adapt to that change so that you can stay up to date on those trends. If you build a mentality that, no, we've been doing it this way for the last 30 years, therefore, we're just going to do it this way, eventually, you're going to suffer personally and professionally because people don't want to be dealing with the old school way. They want to be moving forward as technology and everything else develops. So you need to be that person that's open-minded and it's willing to welcome that change to stay on top of things.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add on to the starting on second base, like because you mentioning the conference made me think of this. I did this podcast from a conference. I guess it was last week or the week before, and I had many people come up being like, who hadn't been on the podcast, I didn't even know were tuning in, and they're like, "Oh, I'm a fan," and I was like,
yeah.
And that, I mean, first of all, it's awesome, and I'm just like so happy that to hear people like tuning in and listening, and like, but also it was like, oh yeah, I'll sit down for a mini episode because I already know what you're all about.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so it's that benefit that comes with personal branding, right? That now people are approaching you rather than you approaching them. And for a good reason, you're putting content out, you're putting your own personal opinions out there. People align with it. Some people don't. Some people are going to hate you for it, but that's okay. That's just how the world is. And but the majority of people are going to align with your beliefs and how you are as a professional. And they're going to try to find ways to work with you for those same reasons. And that's good because those are the business relationships that are going to last longer, because it's not just the business that was determined over just buying them a meal. It's determined based on values, based on just they align with your visions, with your mission, and you two align and you share that, and that goes a longer way.
Yeah.
I think too, just like your willingness to put yourself out there, do a podcast, get these people on, all the hustle that it takes to even coordinate this, put it together, put it out, publish it, market it once it's complete. All of that tells me a lot as someone that would need a service. Is, hey, if she's willing to do all of these things, then she's got to be a rock star because she's hustling, she's smart enough to be well connected, she's asking smart questions. And she's nerdy because she likes doing all these kind of things. Like without thinking of it, your personal brand is, you're telling anybody that's listening, you're telling them so many things just by having a freaking podcast, right?
Yeah.
And because like that in of itself is like, you're willing to put yourself out there, you're willing to do all these things to go above and beyond, to stay consistent. You're telling people about how you likely do work without even talking about a single file. Like there's so much that people can glean from this
Yeah.
that they can then say, wow, or they can extrapolate. If she's willing to do all of these things and go above and beyond and stay consistent and all the things that we talked about, then she's got to be freaking awesome at what she does. So even though you're not here spending an hour talking about a single file, people can gather from listening about what you're about. And even if they don't listen to the whole thing, just the fact that they see you consistently putting these podcasts out, saying she's going for it. She doesn't care what the reception is or if people like it or don't like it. If she's going for it and she's freaking doing it. And that says a lot about your personality, your work ethic, and a lot of other things without even having to talk about it. That's, I think, in a nutshell, the power of personal branding. You can do all these things without bragging about yourself, but what you're doing subliminally, people are saying she's freaking good at what she does, and all that you're telling a bunch about yourself without even talking about yourself. And that, I think, is really, really what personal branding is about.
And it complements when you're selling the idea or trying to convey the idea that you're a service partner rather than a vendor, right? Because a vendor, it's somebody that just gives you a service, collects their money, and they're done, right? They don't go above and beyond to do more, to try to obviously add value and benefit whoever they're providing the service for. And when you're a service partner, you more often than not, you go above and beyond. And sometimes some of this stuff, you may not bill for it, but you just go above and beyond because that's just who you are as a person. That's who you are as a business. And that behavior reflects itself with your personal branding. Hey, if you're willing to carve out 2-3 hours a day, every single day to stay consistent with your personal branding, nobody's paying you for that. You're not making any money out of it, but you're still making the time to do that. That complements that behavior and further reinforces that you are the type of firm, you are the type of business that goes above and beyond, because you're not looking at the decimals per hour or every hour. You're just looking at the bigger picture stuff. And look, we're going to do this because this is what's going to add value. And this is what's going to be good for this particular file per se. And that directly, reflects on all the effort of doing all that personal branding without really, getting paid for it in a way.
Well, and one thing that comes up a lot, or I notice a lot, is you have to be willing to get a little uncomfortable and maybe go outside your comfort zone a little bit, because no change comes from doing the same thing you've always done over and over, and you're really nothing's gonna happen that way. So if you gotta push outside your comfort zone a little bit, and I share this all the time. I mean, when I first started engaging on LinkedIn and posting videos, I wrote a book about, or a chapter in a book about it. Like, I was terrified. I was like, who is going to want to look at my face and listen to me talk about something and listen to my voice? And it was terrible. Like, I mean, it was not terrible, but I was so uncomfortable with it. And it wasn't until after I did it a few times that I was like, it's not so bad. And the same thing came with this podcast. I was like, oh, who is going to want to listen to me talk? And then you do it after a while, you're like, it's like second nature. I used to get all nervous and write all these notes and outlines and all this. And I'm like, now I'm just coming in for a conversation.
Yeah. Josh described that when we spoke at the RIMS conference recently. Somebody from the audience asked a similar question. Hey, what if you're an introvert, or what if you're not too used to being out there? How do you surpass that, and how do you get to the point of just putting yourself out there, right? What if I'm not comfortable enough to make a post about my opinion and let everybody see it? Then how do you get to that level? One, I think the audience people on LinkedIn, they're always ready for it. The ones that are not ready for it is us, right? We need to develop ourselves mentally. Mm-hmm. So that's the biggest step. But it was mentioned about just liking and commenting on other people's posts. Hey, like and comment, start like that. Maybe if you have some sort of question or some sort of topic that you want to post out there, but you don't want to be too assertive about it, that it would sound like it's your personal opinion. Turn that into a question. I remember that's what Josh said. Turn it into a question and ask people for their feedback. Hey, what do you guys think about this? And you're kind of indirectly mentioning that, but you're not making it yours at that point. And so people start giving you their opinion, and you just kind of work your way up there until you're mentally ready to now, okay, this is what I believe in, and this is what I stand for, and boom, I'm just going to post it and just put it out there. But it is a process, more mentally than not,
Yes.
to get there.
It sure is. It's definitely some mental gymnastics
Yeah.
and mindset gymnastics. I think it's like getting
Yeah.
out of your own way.
Yeah.
And I would say for me, that'd be the best piece of advice I would give to anyone is like, just stop talking yourself out of it and get out of your own way. Like the only one overthinking this is you.
Yeah. You can't expect results out of the circle if you don't step out of the circle.
Yes.
Right. So you have to step out, and if you don't step out, well, then just don't complain about not really getting the results or that career, promotion or that business development. If you're just not stepping out of it, it's okay. I mean, people are extroverts, people are introverts. Some people are more outgoing than others. Some people can talk for hours like Josh and I, and obviously you're very good at communicating too. Some people are just too shy and they can't even turn on their camera because it would just make them really anxious. But everybody has to start somewhere. And so the importance is wherever you're at in that spectrum, just take that step and take it at whatever pace works for you, but just take the step to start. Because if you don't do that, well, we're almost at the end of the year already. And I remember that we just had this conversation about let's crush 2022. And it feels like it was probably a couple of weeks ago. And we're going to probably plan let's crush 2023 coming in here pretty soon.
Yeah.
And so for anybody that wasn't willing to take that step, well, guess what? The year's almost done. So you're already a year out. Now let's see next year what happens, right? And that's going to continue moving forward if you just don't take that step. Take it now. A year or two from now, you're going to be an expert at it. So that's how things develop.
Well, and one thing that I wanted to add just about myself personally, like interacting with people like this one-on-one or asking questions and listening and stuff comes very natural to me and it's very comfortable. However, like at a bigger thing, like at a conference, when I walk into a big room, that is so overly intimidating to me because I'm like, I feel so, I don't know how to go up to some stranger and start talking to them. It feels so awkward and just awkward. It's just awkward for me. And this is is much more comfortable because I feel like I can actually have a real conversation with someone rather than like awkwardly walking up like, so how's the cheese? It's not, not good at that. So my point is finding something that like works for you and just how you best interact with people in a genuine way. And it takes some trial and error to figure that out too. And you have to not be scared to do it a little wrong to find the right.
Yeah, totally. I agree with that.
Josh, do you have any closing pieces of advice for someone just trying to get started in their branding?
I would say just do it. Just don't worry about what people think. Get out there, do it. Find through the course of this, trial and error, you're going to figure out what your voice is. You're going to figure out what you feel comfortable sharing, where you want to put yourself out there, what's working for you, what's not. And but you just have to do it. And you will reap the benefits. They won't be immediate, as we talked about earlier, but over the course of time, there will be a cumulative effect. And it will absolutely help out with whatever your goal is. If it's growth, if it's reputation, if it's new business opportunities, your next job, whatever it's going to be, that will get there so long as you put in the work, you build that network, and you build up that following. So just get out there and do it, and don't worry about what people think. Don't judge what you get out of it by likes and comments and shares and reposts. That doesn't matter. In the early stages, you have to know that this is a long-term trajectory, and that so long as you are being you and sharing your authentic and personal self, what the perception will be from others is it'll shine through. And just work on the messaging, working on relaying it, and it'll definitely be worth it in the long run.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to take home. So I want to thank you both for coming on and joining joining me to talk about, personal branding and taking the first step. And you guys, both of you have accomplished so much with your businesses, and you both are just putting yourselves out there. So I encourage anyone listening who doesn't know how to start, just I'm going to invite them to reach out to Josh and Chris and, pick their brain. I mean, just like Chris said, ask questions. They both put themselves out there, and, are really successful at it. So I encourage anyone who doesn't know what to do, or, even if you're not in the business development, your field is not into business development, it's still, you can build a brand and put yourself out there. And, it always helps, whether you're thinking about maybe career changes or promotions or this or that. I think it works in all sorts of environments. So I encourage everyone to reach out to Josh and Chris and pick their brain. You pick their brain to me too, but they're probably better.
Every job is a sales job. We're reading that, and we're going to be talking about it in the book club. So, and that translates to personal branding. So whether they, like you said, whether they are in business development or not, whether they're an entrepreneur or maybe just or they're not, maybe a claims examiner, risk manager, whatever the situation is, you still need to understand personal branding and how to leverage it to be able to sell yourself, because that's what's going to allow you to get those increases, those promotions, that next opportunity. So yeah, it's crucial to growth.
So, thank you, Josh and Chris, for joining me again today. If you could just let everyone know how they could find you, so they can ask you those burning questions that they may have about personal branding or whatever else they might want to ask you.
Yep, absolutely. No, absolutely. Josh Diggs, you can find me on LinkedIn. Email is jdiggs, diggs @modernreign, REIGN.com, and my cell phone, because I'm crazy and I post on LinkedIn, I'm crazy like that, 714-200-4125.
Yep. And Chris Gutierrez, you can also find me on LinkedIn. My email, Chris, CHRIS @Strike INV, so STRYKEINV as in Victor.com. And I also put my cell phone out there. So 323-203-4329. So call me, text me. Just don't call me, don't FaceTime me at 2 a.m. I'll probably be knocked out at that time. But other than that, I'll answer any other time.
Yeah. And you can call them about, that their car warranty running out too. They appreciate it.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah.
Well, for everyone listening, of course, as always, if you like what you hear, please like and subscribe to The Defense Never Rests. You can find us on Apple Podcasts as well as TDNR Podcasts on YouTube.